Bright, bold, beautiful. That's what Oldhammer is about. Being as vibrant as it can be. So in this video I paint a bunch of old school style miniatures to replicate the Oldhammer style with new tools. I have a question for all of you. Who returned to miniature painting or terrain crafting out of nostalgia? Well, if your answer is I did, we both share something in common. This yearning for past events, experiences, and even the toys you collected can be incredibly potent, especially if you long for a period filled with happy personal associations. In the realm of miniatures, this often revolves around older editions of Warhammer. Conversely, in the RPG sector, it's commonly the first couple of editions of Dungeons & Dragons that evoke this strong feeling. The latter has the whole OSR scene catering to long-time roleplayers' nostalgia itch. In miniature gaming, however, it's often the miniatures themselves that trigger this sentiment. Here, nothing screams nostalgia more clearly than Oldhammer. But what is this Oldhammer actually? The way I see it, there is neither a clear definition for this method of painting, nor is there a specific technique to employ. It is more the finished look of the miniature that makes Oldhammer, well, Oldhammer. Of course, there are specific paint ranges that try to emulate the style of the old Citadel paints, and you can even get your hands on old unopened paint pots as well. But you don't necessarily need incredibly old or specifically formulated paints to achieve a vibrant and nostalgia-evoking color scheme. To illustrate this point, I recently experimented with a brand new range of hand-sculpted, old-school styled miniatures by Jonas of Bequest Miniatures. Jonas generously provided me with an exclusive first batch of his new fantasy adventurers that are coming to Kickstarter. These remarkable miniatures draw inspiration from artists like Frank Rosetta or Ralph Bakshi, while also incorporating Jonas' own unique interpretation. If you're interested in acquiring your own set of these old-school metal miniatures, you can find the link to the Kickstarter campaign down below, which launches today. Before I began painting, however, I needed to decide on the basis for the miniatures. I found myself torn between two options. Round bases, which most of my miniatures already feature, especially those used for RPG sessions, and square bases, which would fully embrace the old school aesthetic. As the old world transitioned to larger 25mm bases, I still have a lot of old 20mm size square ones that I won't use anymore. Considering this and the desire for an old school aesthetic, it was an easy decision to opt for the 20mm bases. Also embracing the old school aesthetic, I opted for a simple yet effective approach to base decoration. A coat of coarse sand adhered with PVA glue was all it took. No tufts, no bark chips and no texture paste. Nothing but sandy 90s glory. Painting turned out to be more of an experiment than I initially had planned. Though my method essentially involved the basic 3-step process of layering, washing, and highlighting. Conclusively, this won't be a step-by-step guide on old school painting. Instead, it's more about my thought process and why I did what I did. I find it much more enjoyable to approach painting in a way where I allow myself room for discovery and exploration rather than follow a rigid plan. By embracing this mindset, you also may uncover new possibilities and techniques for yourself. But let's take it step by step. The first step, priming. There is no real argument here and I opted for the most basic first coat possible, simple white primer. There is a method to this simplicity. As you may recall, I aimed for a bright and colorful paint scheme, and white serves as an excellent base to achieve that. Additionally, I deliberately decided against applying a zenithal undercoat, considering it a rather modern concept. I took a very basic approach by applying simple layers of paint to the miniature. I didn't bother with shading, blending or any other fancy techniques. I selected fitting colors and applied them to specific areas while keeping color theory in mind. Fans of comics might recognize some of the color schemes like the blue, red and yellow reminiscent of Superman's or Iron Man's costumes, or the green and violet scheme used for the Hulk or the Riddler. Drawing inspiration from comic books, especially for quick and colorful yet harmonious schemes, can be incredibly helpful. With these colors in place, I went to the shading step. This is also where I took the first deviation from the standard pattern of painting by utilizing oil paints. Normally you would use these types of paints to add a grim, dark aesthetic to your models. This is, however, the exact opposite of what I was trying to achieve. But still, I was curious to figure out if this idea would ultimately work out. So I mixed 3 different paints, namely magenta, Prussian blue and burnt umber with a tiny bit of white spirit, and added that to a specific area. The magenta mix went onto the skin, the dark blue on red, blue and violet surfaces, and the brown was used for green, yellow and of course brown. I let them sit for about half an hour and removed the excess with cotton swabs and sponges. Now, I'm still not completely comfortable with this method and sometimes it's not looking as intended. So I experimented with paint consistency, making sure the mixture was less fluid. I believed this would lead to interesting transitions and a much more natural shading effect. This stains the underlying surface slightly, though it can be comfortably removed if needed. My initial plan for highlighting was to use standard acrylic miniature paints. However, I felt a sudden urge to try something different. These are Molotov paints, or more specific, marker refill bottles from Molotov. You might have seen me use them on my channel before, or perhaps you have seen them being used by Marco Frisoni, which is admittedly more likely. Typically, I use these paints through an airbrush to achieve quick color variations without the need to thin them down beforehand. So why use them for highlighting? I simply remember their incredible coverage. I often struggle to achieve sufficient coverage with thinly applied paints, especially when thinning down standard miniature paints to the right level. However, with these paints, there is no need to thin them down at all. You can use them straight from the bottle. That high coverage isn't ideal for blending though, but to be perfectly honest, I don't care that much about smooth blends. I simply lack the patience for that. Now, as a final step, I painted every base in Vallejo's Goblin Green, gave the ground texture a quick wash with a thinned down Shamrock Green speed paint, and dry brushed it with yellow. And with that, these classic adventurers were ready for the next big dungeon crawl. Now, what an interesting experiment this turned out to be. I must admit, I almost forgot how exhilarating it can be to challenge your own conventions and discover new, intriguing ways to achieve your goals. How about you? Do you relish the excitement of trying new things in a fresh way, or do you prefer sticking to your tried and true methods? Personally, I find great joy in exploring novel approaches to painting and crafting. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you do, don't forget to like and subscribe for more exciting content like this. If you'd like to support Lennox Realm even further, consider becoming a patron on Patreon. Your contributions help me continue creating videos for you, and in return you get behind the scenes updates and exclusive content. For those who can't get enough of painting experiments, be sure to check out this video right here. Once again, thank you for watching, and until next time, farewell fellow adventurers.